It's really what you do in the aftermath and then what you do to get not only reactive, but preventative in the future. A sense of complacency can creep in when we make the hard look easy over time. You should have a constant sense or state of unease in your operation.
Welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm really happy to have my good friend Bob Waltz back with me. Bob is now the director of flight operations at Surf Air, based down in Texas. Now you guys moved your offices down to Texas, I believe, from California, right, Bob?
We are, and yeah. So it was great. Surf is a great company that we've been in discussions for a bit of time, and when an opportunity came back to come back to Texas and work with a very growing company with a very varied business model and really infused with technology and innovation. When they offered me the vice president of flight operations position and a chance to lead and be a part of that, I couldn't say no.
There you go. No, I love it. You guys, it's a pretty cool little company and lots going on there. But you've got an amazing background. Southwest Airlines, vice president of flight operations at Southwest Airlines for a couple of years. You were up at Sun Country for a little while, running their flight operations for a bit. And now, so it's a great time to have you on as we talk as the spotlight has returned, not in a good way, to aviation. Obviously the Reagan mishap and then the fiasco down in Phoenix with or in Scottsdale with Lear 35.
Yeah.
A couple other events. So I'm still a big believer that the system works. In the time that this podcast will take to record, we'll probably have 1,000 airplanes take off and land safely in the country. So that says something in itself. But let's just talk about a little bit of what's happening in the industry from a safety standpoint and take it from there. So, I mean,
I appreciate
you've seen the world.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And most recently, like you said, one of the trip I just came back from, I do work at Embry-Riddle University as well with the Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety. And we were Robert Sumwalt and I were over there working through a program with Boeing with the Indonesian DGCA, their FAA, and discussing exactly this, discussing safety management systems at the state level, which is interesting because in the U.S., we don't really have a state program for safety management systems. The FAA is responsible for the oversight of each carrier's SMS, but we really don't have the state-sponsored program. So there was a lot of good learnings there. But like you, I'm a believer. I think when you build a good system, there will be times where things don't always work out, and they're the opportunities to learn. But it's really what you do in the aftermath and then what you do to get not only reactive, but preventative in the future that matters. So I think from what I've seen, the reaction has been appropriate, that the studies are, and some of the immediate, regulation is kind of going into effect to ensure that highest level of safety for the flying public. So it's all of us as aviation professionals, our responsibility to get involved and stay involved in this. And I think I think some good discussions are going on and some better things will come from it.
I think, the thing that bothers me the most about Reagan, and then, it's, obviously that was the big kickoff. That was the big catalyst for the discussions now. And I wrote a blog. I said, it's all going to come out. And everybody was really, jumping on the bandwagon. Let's go blame some Army helicopter pilot. And I'm like, hey, look, it's Reagan at night. There's a lot of spatial disorientation. There's a river, there's lights, it's a chaotic environment. And I said, it's all going to come out eventually in the data. And all of a sudden it did come out. And you found out that in the last couple of the days prior to that, a couple of incidents involving commercial airliners having to abort approaches because of helicopter traffic. And then you find out from Sean Duffy yesterday, he sits there and says, well, there were 800 of those incidents in the last 2 years. And all of a sudden it comes out. The data is right there. And
I agree.
Nobody fessed up.
Yeah, and it's really, and what's interesting about that, And for all the years of, the required reporting for, TCAS reporting, et cetera, you wonder what happens with those reports because you don't see a lot of feedback that comes back from them. So that's kind of one thing. But again, under safety management systems, SMS, that's an assessment tool. That data should be driving action. When you've got data that's not driving action, that's concerning in my mind. That's an opportunity. I see that as an opportunity. Secondly, I think there's a lot to be said around what you mentioned around this desire to rapidly find, blame. We call that kind of a safety one approach. It's the old school. Blame it on the folks who aren't there to defend themselves, the folks, unfortunately, who might be, part of the mishap. When really the more informed view has always become over time the kind of this more safety two view of looking at the system. People are key operators in the system, and there's very much human factors issues, other issues that you've got to consider, but you also have to expand that out to the management, the mission, the equipment, what was going on, and then really the operational setup. Because I think what can happen, and you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, a sense of complacency can creep in when we make the hard look easy over time. When you look at the sheer number of operations, like you said, I mean, when I was working at Southwest, every day we were flying generally anywhere between 2,500 and some days as many as 4,000 flights a day. Like that. And then going to Sun Country where that number was much smaller. And then even here at Surf, where we're running 13 lines of flying. Now, what's interesting, the same skill sets and the same procedures have to be used for whether you're operating one airplane or you're operating 900. And it's just, how you scale it. So against that backdrop, two quick thoughts. One, and this is one that I love, and Robert Sumwalt, and Robert won't mind that I'm kind of quoting him on this, but I love this thought, and I think every safety professional should have it. You should have a constant sense or state of unease in your operation, because the minute you start thinking you're there, I would say you're not frosty. Like go to the flying world, stay frosty. The minute you're not frosty, it's time to kind of step away from that for a minute. A informed look will give us better results, and I think that's where we're going to. It's just hard to force the world to tap the brakes for a minute and let the investigation happen, because that's where the good learnings come. The rush to judgment never helps.
Yeah. I look at it like, hey, look, everybody's got, the safety management system. You've got a micro SMS. You've got the airport, the airport operation right there. Everybody's taking care. Are we operating safely at the airport? And then it goes out a little bit more. But when I start to hear about, hey, look, we've got all this data, start fessing up, and somebody call foul and go, hey, look, we've had some incidents or disruptions. We need to focus on this. Maybe we need to pull a few flights out of, maybe we need to pull a few flights out of an airport, or, the FlexJet incident a couple weeks ago in Chicago. Pilot, you could tell if the crew was a little overwhelmed. I looked at it like, okay, you got a crew that's a little overwhelmed, and then the air traffic controller, ground controller could have just said, hey, look, just stop where you are. Got a few things happening, and then, go from there. It was clear. And I don't blame anybody. It's, you go into a new airport environment, it can be, it's overwhelming. But when you start to see a lot of the data like that, it's all of a sudden time to go, hey, wait, we're not necessarily comfortable here. Let's talk about it. A little safety stand down or whatever.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, and again, I am definitely not a person who advocates layering, say bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy as you go forward. But I think it kind of goes back to that discussion we were having in Indonesia around a state-sponsored program. The question we were asked by the DGCA was, what are the key performance indicators or safety performance indicators, KPIs or SPIs, that the federal government has held against carriers that, is kind of their standard of which they evaluate them? And, Robert and I both were like, that's interesting, but there are none in the U.S. I mean, the regulations are the regulations, but we don't put out a environment, there is really no place where that information comes out that says if you have, this number of, close encounters between aircraft, or, you hit a certain number of certain pilot deviations, whatever it is, that gets you heightened scrutiny. There's kind of it's very on a spectrum, if you will. Maybe that's one of these things where, again, where information like this should drive, and it might have to be from the federal level, because they may see more holistically than even the carriers see, because one carrier, they see their data. They may see other carriers' data through the Aviation Safety Reporting System, either through SIAS or ASRS. But there's not, again, I think there is a gap there. There's an opportunity, I would say, to then use that data to push forward. And we used to see it at FAA info shares, where you would typically see that type of data presented, and then discussions would come from that. But we may be in a world in which now, where the operations are getting so integrated, we need to have a little bit more of those conversations. But not only conversations that lead to action. That's the key. And then who owns those actions?
Yeah. So I got a text. It's really funny. I got a text after the Toronto incident with the CRJ, and the text back was, "Wait till the investigation. You weren't there. You don't know what happened. Wind is gusting to CRJ. I don't know. I'm not going to place blame on anybody or anything." But I said, look at the alternatives. The fuselage stayed intact.
Mm-hmm.
The 16G seats worked. Everybody, some injuries, but you think about, like, hey, look, that airplane held together pretty well. The certification standards work. Yeah. It shows people that the stuff that you don't see is, you don't see it because you're not meant to see it, but it works. And it's sort of like a trust us mentality, but the FAA and the OEMs and all the support, everything that goes into an aircraft is purpose built.
Yeah.
On the flip side too, going to Chicago, the system worked. You had two pilots in a Southwest jet going, hey, we're flying into it's a tight airport. Everybody knows Midway's a tight airport. Somebody had their head out of the cockpit.
Yeah.
And was very aware. It shows the system, that the system and the cockpits, they're working.
Yes. No, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. So if there is in all of these issues, I think there's a lot of, we should feel that it shows what a system safety approach can do. It will constantly make us better, and it challenge us to make us better. Sometimes it may seem like, why are we doing these things, when you may not immediately see the repercussions or the results of that work. But I would agree with you wholeheartedly that for the airlines, the involvement of an advanced qualification program, taking training from the traditional kind of N&O programs into a realm in which you try to you drive your evaluations to being much more line oriented, using the things that crews have seen throughout the year. And I'll use this term, and who would have ever thought the term inoculation would become somewhat of a politicized term, but that's what an advanced qualification program does for crews, is that a good one throughout the year, from all the irregularities and the things that, say, a certain crew have seen and that there were good learnings from, or things that there's value in letting the rest of the line see throughout that annual cycle. What one crew sees in the beginning of the end of the prior year, by the following year, all the other crews have seen it. And that's one of those things that I know at Southwest, very personally, as having been the 119 chief pilot there, the go around, the dangers in the terminal environment. Again, it's a high threat environment. It seems very routine, but as you know, it's not. I mean, it's a lot of pieces of metal moving around, and like you said, at Midway, that's essentially, we look at that as the size of a carrier deck. I mean, there is no there is no room on that airport to every space, whether you're landing, taking off, or taxiing, especially if it starts getting busy, is vital. There's nowhere to go. It's basically it's less than a one square mile, piece of real estate. So all that being said, exactly that it was, there were years, or probably the last 2 or 3 years for the crew at Southwest have been seeing events like that with go rounds, even down into the flare, even around to training that, on the 7-3, you can go around all the way until you deploy the reversers. And then we would practice that. Just, you never know what's going to happen. You land and someone at the other end of the runway gets cleared across. Are you going to are you going to stop, or are you just going to take it around? You got all that energy. If I got all that smash, I'm going to take it around. Why would you even try to, I don't want to bet on my 4 wheels and the brakes. I'd rather, this airplane's going to fly. So your point's well taken. I mean, it's all of those things, the layers on top of each other, that really kept everyone safe there. And I think there will be some good learnings coming out of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it just says, so how many airplanes in your fleet now? How many airplanes at Surf Air? And you're pretty well
Surf Air right now. Yeah, so we are small right now. So we are basically about, and we're taking some airplanes out, but we're right around 40-ish or so aircraft. And then where the thought process is down the road is we take some of our older airplanes out. We're going to increase the size of our fleet. Meanwhile, we're also working on an electrification effort there, working with Textron and basically being the providers under the STC for this new work. So that's exciting as we go forward, and we hope to continue that work out into the future.
Yeah. So what are you telling your pilots? I mean, they're pretty wild. You've got some essential air service. You're out in Hawaii. You're pretty well dispersed. What are you telling your, what's the message you send to your pilots every day in your ground crews?
And that's funny. And and what's been fun for me is my personal journey, I've gone from it, and again, being blessed to, leading a flight ops group at Southwest where, and just as a reflection of what's going on in the industry as well. When I took over leadership role there, we were still, the folks we were hiring were folks who had a lot of experience. They've all been, a lot of them have been check pilots before. Many of them have been management pilots. Many of them, their backgrounds, whether they came through the civilian or the military side, they all had been captains. They've all been a lot of things. That started to, the experience level started to go down, especially around post-pandemic. Then going to Sun Country, it's a little bit more, again, some very seasoned pilots there, but, kind of maybe the top, maybe 50-ish or so, maybe 100. But then the rest of the group was somewhere, much more middle to low time, to now at Surf, where we're literally, our SICs, because again, we only require one pilot to fly the aircraft, but we do have, under the pilot development program, we have an SIC program. So we bring our new pilots on where they'll sit second in command and be under kind of the tutelage of a captain for a period of time till they're eligible to upgrade. So now I'm at the other end of the spectrum. But the beauty of it is the same things apply all the way across. The application of good, whether you use crew resource management, threat and error management, or risk and resource management, whatever terminology you want to use, that communication, that using all available resources, that always looking at the operation through a lens of risk, and really, and at any time, being willing and having the full support of myself and our leadership to tap the brakes, to make sure that you know what's going on. If you see something, say something. Even though you're new, don't sit there and be quiet because you think this is how it should be. Sometimes that person who asks the question prevents the mishap. So it's all of those things early on, as we also try to build good training and then process and procedure for them. So that's what's fun. We're going through a major revamp of all of our standard operating procedures to kind of consolidate and take them up a notch. But we also want to make it easy for the younger pilot to succeed. So a lot going on here.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, so you're where are you bringing your second command and your first officer program? Where are they coming out of like University of North Dakota and K-State, or
they are very much, typically 500 to 600 hour folks. Most have been CFIs. You may have some who are time building who weren't CFIs, so they really are. But it's the UNDs, it's the Purdue's. We've got some good programs with both a number of universities as well as a number of 141 schools as well. But yeah, that's the group we bring on, and we generally will keep them. We'll keep some folks longer, but by the time they qualify to get their ATP, that's when they start. Now they're more marketable, So that's one of the things that's where we have to. We've got a window in which we know how to operate in that window, so we really push our procedures to be successful, with that group of pilots.
So all right. So I'll flip the script on you. Two questions.
Yeah.
What are these young kids teaching you guys?
Oh man. Well, you know what? I think they're teaching us about a whole, and I mean, you and I are probably pretty similar in age. I mean, it's interesting. And of course, I've got a 29-year-old and 27-year-old daughter, and my 29-year-old just got her private pilot's license as well. So it's interesting. So all the way down from the 24-ish, all the way up through, dealing with the 60-ish on the other end. Differences in communication style, differences in what motivates folks around work, and these generational differences, and they're not one size fits all, and not every person. They're good general tools, but I think for us, the value of finding, communicating to pilots where they are. So that's why we've rolled out. We just recently pushed out a crew application that we're as part of our SURF operating system to give tools to pilots on their devices, on their phone, whether Android or iPhone, basically everything they need around the flight, around operational risk management. We call it FRAT. It's basically a form that's filled out where crews can analyze based on weather and the mission set and all of those things, where their risk level is. And that if it's at a certain level, then it requires either a discussion with the chief, or we consider whether or not we're even going to fly that mission that day. I mean, those things, put those tools right where folks like to use them, so they're easy, they're in a way that folks are used to interacting with. That's really that's valuable, and it may not be the way that you and I were used to, using these things. But if we can make the operation seamless, where someone comes from their everyday life, shows up to fly, we've given them good training, we give them tools that look and act and feel like what they're used to, they'll use them, and if they use them, we'll be better off. Again, we just have to build the support structure behind it. So that's what keeps it fun for me. I'm a lifelong learner. I learn something new every day. And as my daughters love to tell me, it's like, Dad, come on. But I think that's fun. And you have to be open to that to be successful.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole, it's, YouTube. I look at, I laugh because, I asked my daughter, she goes, just go look it up on YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. You learn anything in the world on YouTube. Well, yeah, I guess so. It's,
and some of it's good and some of it's bad. That's the hard part.
But it's like I was trying to figure out something to do with Zoom today. And I went, I go to YouTube. Like, oh, okay, I got it. So.
No, it's funny. We had a question around basically the PRD. I've got we got a lot of new folks at SURF, so it's fun for me because I'm having to, I'm new to this company. I'm not new to the industry. So I'm having to, have an opportunity to develop those procedures. But for her, it's exactly what I did. I said, you know what? And the FAA, good on them, has 2 or 3 great videos out there on YouTube around, walk you through the PRD process and how it should work. And so that's where again, let's leverage what's out there. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Not everything has to be a moonshot. If there's really good stuff out there, I'm all for that. Let's use it. Let's be nimble, and let's focus on the next. And not spend a lot of time on things that we can leverage, from out there and that's already there.
So with look, we got Sean Duffy in, new Department of Transportation Administrator. I don't think the FAA Administrator has been announced yet, but what are 2 or 3 things that these guys need to focus on moving forward? I mean, a lot of airplanes in the sky. We got pilot shortages. You got the sine wave of pilot demand. Modernization of the air traffic control system. in your mind, what are a couple things that they need to, or they should be focusing on moving
That's a
in the
great
next 24
question.
months?
Great. Yeah, no, I think, from my perspective, and you can tell my background's in SMS, but the reason I studied safety management systems, I waited a long time before it was interesting. I ended up, getting an advanced degree in the topic because as we were implementing SMS under Part 5 at a carrier that shall remain nameless, who I might have worked at the time, um, it was valuable in my mind, to tell that story and to show folks, especially, or help folks see the value of a system-based approach, a system safety approach that the heuristic that it is useful forever. Whether or not, again, some of the verbiage can change, but what you do, and having very clear policy, in training that policy, having a very specific methodology for analyzing risk, and then going out and then assessing yourself and checking yourself, and then kind of lather, rinse, repeat. In my mind, that's really where any new, cabinet level appointment individual should be well versed in, because when it comes to the FAA, for instance, you've mentioned one, we've got a lot of data that's out there. What are we using that data for, and how is that data turning into action? Again, it's assessment data that's not used it's an opportunity missed. So I would say that person has to be one who is naturally inquisitive, who asks why, and then maybe, goes the 5 whys, keep going down a level to how we got to where we got to, and then what does that mean for us? Don't be satisfied with the investigation's not for academic purposes. It's actually for, okay, now that we've done that, what are we going to go and do next? Around air traffic control, I think one of those things that we need to leverage. I think a look at, again, the qualifications for folks coming in and the number of folks who they allow to train, and maybe being a little bit more holistic in how we look. Again, not meaning you lower standards. That's not it at all. But looking at what does it really take to be successful in that environment? And, and I know they've done some studies in this realm, folks who are very successful at gaming, very successful at dealing with multiple inputs, a lot of different stimuli, and doing it very quickly. Can we leverage those skill sets? Are those folks predisposed to being good controllers? Don't know, but maybe they are. But let's not be afraid to look. Let's not have draconian rules and old systems keep us from leveraging the workforce we have today to go out and do what we can do, as well as leverage tools like AI. Some of the things like we're working on with our SURF operating system down the road. How can we leverage that? Even, again, you've got to have the human in the loop is so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, the AI doesn't get tired when it comes to monitoring. You can set parameters and things that will keep, help the human be a better operator in that system while still letting the human execute on the decision making. I think it's those things that I would love to see our next administrator have that passion and know that there's just so much more to learn. You're never there. And that's what I would like to see in the next administrator.
I was talking to somebody, they were talking about, more data link, more air traffic control commands just being data linked into the cockpit. Do pilots respond better to human voice, or are they going to respond better to data link commands?
That's interesting. I think in certain settings, like for instance, where we use a lot of data link today is for oceanic, is a great place where you're kind of, you're flying, you're kind of droning, you're needing to do, fairly routine things. We are using it more and more in the CONUS as well, en route structure. It gets permeating its way down into the arrival, departure and arrival sector. There's a certain point at which I think there's some value in it, because it is a way that you can see. It's another modality. The audio modality, as you well know, on the airplane, sometimes can be missed, can be clipped. Even with noise canceling headsets, sometimes people step on each other on the frequencies. So there are opportunities for it to be missed. but there's also some good value when you think about even, on aircraft where, the term, bitching Betty, it's the voice is what audio, a shrill voice, kind of screaming at you at certain points does get your attention. I think there is value in both. I don't know that we ever get to a world in which it's pure data link, but I think multiple modalities are good, and they each have their purpose.
I just don't want to get to the point where it's kind of like, hey, will you turn that warning horn off? I can't hear a damn thing. I can't focus.
Well, that's exactly it. It's interesting that we're having that discussion. And I just had that discussion with one of the engineers yesterday on the SURF operating system around uh, events that have to trigger for the right reasons. And if they're triggering falsely, and folks, it takes a very short time where folks realize. And for instance, we saw that when we first put some of the tactical systems into the C-130 around terrain avoidance. We flew 200-foot modified contour all the time visually with no warning systems whatsoever, and we somehow stayed out of the trees. The minute they turned those systems on, they realized that they weren't set up correctly for our mission until we had a tactical override button. You had a period where folks were just flying through warnings. That's the worst thing you can do. So I agree with you 100%. The engineered solution only works when it's engineered.
I rented a Hyundai in Miami. I was down in Miami. Yeah, I went to the airport. I rented a Hyundai. Miami traffic.
Yeah.
The damn thing's got so many warning horns on, you're afraid to do anything. And eventually it's like, hey, look, I understand your concern here, Mr. Engineers who put all this crap in, but yeah, I've been driving. I get it. I get it.
Yep, and you almost have to have a bubble or some, at least that decreasing sensitivity level.
There you go. So let's talk about Surf Air a little bit. So VP of Flight Operations down there, you guys are. I forgot that you were electrifying the Caravan. I did. Mm-hmm. I remember that you got the STC, or you're working on an STC for that. How's that coming along? Where do you see the market for? I mean, is that going to be purely cargo? What are you seeing there? And what's happening at Surf Air?
No, well, and thank you for that. So we're going through a fleet reinvigoration project for our traditional air breathing fleet right now. So that's good work and exciting work to do. Meanwhile, against that work, that's the work we're doing with Textron on the Caravan. That we're really for both variants, both the cargo and the passenger variant. We see great opportunity here. And as we move towards a more sustainable long-term operation, we're just the right size. I think one of the things that Surf Air that's interesting about us is we kind of, and we are actually, will still be in this very niche kind of environment in between where potentially urban air mobility from, say, very remote areas could be coming into, say, a vertiport, and the vertiport may be at an outlying airport where then you can get on to one of our aircraft that may take you kind of that next, couple 100-mile journey into a larger airport to get you into the larger system, much like Essential Air Service Plus, if you will. We feel that's a great market for the electrification effort. And meanwhile, these airplanes are used. I was a C-130 driver, like the C-130, they're just a great utility airplane for that. It's one step below, the service level of, say, a 145 or a 175. But there's just so many arenas where it works better than the jet. I mean, really, the jet is, and that's what's interesting in the EAS market right now, is we're seeing a lot of the larger carriers kind of trying to get away from their feeders and actually even throw 7.3s onto some of these markets, which again, even the smallest 7.3 is really just too much airplane for a lot of these routes. So we see great opportunity here. We see worldwide opportunity for the airplane, and especially as it moves forward and aligns with many of the national directives, especially, outside of the U.S., where they're driving folks to be, more energy efficient. So again, for a lot of reasons, we think this is a great project, and we're making steady headway on it.
Well, 27-minute flight last week, 27-minute flight from Wilmington, ILM to Charlotte.
Yep.
On an A319.
There you go.
Wow.
That's one of those things that it just doesn't, make a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
If
You
you
know,
can
these
balance out
vehicles.
if you can balance out the cycles on it a little bit, it makes a little bit more
Yeah.
sense. But yeah, you'd rather just see, you know, you could do that flight easily in a Caravan, or you could do it easily
Hmm.
on, but that's the issue. Is the regional jets, the CRJ 700, 900, they're not making them anymore. They're getting a lot of cycles flown on them every year.
Yeah.
Like what's coming up next? The A220 is expensive. The
Hmm.
E2 is expensive.
Yeah.
What comes up behind it? So that's going to be a great challenge
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
aircraft engineers to figure out.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in the, really the future of power plants, it's exciting, but it is challenging because we've really kind of reached the limit with your traditional gas turbine engines, as far as efficiency goes, and running like we did the LEAP on the Max.
Yep.
Flying the aircraft, that the tolerances are so tight, they've really wrung out. I mean, the fuel efficiency is about as good as you're going to get, and still be still have an engine that's operable in the real world. That's the challenge. And even with that airplane, with the tight tolerances, there's longer warm up and cool down periods with it. So you start kind of creeping into your efficiency. Yeah, you're saving on the gas, but you're not saving on the time. And that,
Well, the engines burn hotter,
yeah,
so they're more maintenance intensive. So it's a balance, like everything in aviation. It's a little bit
it
of a
is.
balance there. So
It really
how long
is.
are you guys away? How long are you away? You thinking about what's the timeline on the STC for the Caravan? Do you think?
Well, I hate to overcommit, but we're basically, probably a year to 2 years out on it. But we're making steady progress, on it. The good news is Textron's a great partner here. And, that's one of those, this is an effort that the scale is right. It's not too big. It's not like we're going out and trying to, re-engine a 4-engine aircraft. And I've got really good faith in how this thing's going to come out.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's end it here, and let's come back and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it when we have some more updates on the on that motor.
Oh, I would love it. That'd be great, Craig. And as always, thanks for putting out these podcasts. I mean, I'm an avid listener, and I appreciate the folks you bring on. It's a great discussion, and it just keeps us all informed. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Bob, for coming on board talking about safety and
Sure,
what's happening
my
to Surf Air.
pleasure. Yeah,
Thanks for coming.
great. Take care, Craig.